All right, so it's time to do another video. First one seemed to go pretty well. People liked it. I got a lot of good feedback. Actually, nobody had anything bad to say, which if you do something on the internet and nobody has something bad to say, that's pretty good. So I was getting the 59A prepped for paint, and I realized, all right, I still have to take care of the oil pan and this and that, and I got everything together, and I realized that the threads in the dipstick boss, they're gone. The dipstick won't stay in tight, and this gasket on the oil pan where the dipstick boss meets is very, very, very often overlooked. I've done it before a couple of times when I've built or assembled, resealed, whatever you want to call it on a flathead, and everything is great, and you still get some oil running out of the boss. All right. Problem with this is that the boss is riveted, and being that most people don't have access to something, a proper way to rivet it. You could use pop rivets, you could use nuts and bolts. The pop rivets are kind of, they're a little sloppy. Nut and bolt, you run the risk of something loosening up, falling into the pan. So the way I do this, we'll be able to remove this without removing the pan, which on a flathead is a huge pain. It's a lot of work. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill this out. We're going to remove it. We're going to put the new one on, and we are going to use the weld nuts on the inside. So we're going to weld the nuts on the inside of the pan. They're not regular nuts. They're meant to be welded, and we're going to do that. And then in the future, if I do ever have a leak or there's an issue, I could just simply unbolt this, and it makes it a lot easier to service in the future. That's a big deal when you build a car, all right? When you build it, you could build a car and everything could look great and this and that, but you also need to be able to fix and repair, remove things without other things being in the way or a complete pain in the ass. So I'm going to show you how I do this. It's pretty simple. It's not rocket science, but you know what? If it helps a couple people, give some people an idea, and hey, that's not a bad idea, then you know what? And this video has served its purpose, and you can get to see how people do this stuff. So I'm gonna go get the drill and a couple other things, and we'll get to work. All right? All right, so what we're gonna do now is I already drilled 2 of them out. We're gonna drill the last one out. What really comes in handy is I have this tight fit right angle drill adapter. You could use a right angle drill. You could get in here and grind the rivets down. I just find that this is a little bit easier. All right, so it fits in there nice. You can see what you're doing. Once that rivet is almost completely drilled out, what we'll do is we'll just kind of peen it over with a punch. We don't want to risk damaging the oil pan. This is a 2-piece oil pan. Okay, these aren't the easiest to come by or the most affordable. And we will knock the rivets out. That one's starting to come out. We'll give it a little bit more. You don't want to drill into the pan, all right? We just want to knock that lip off. And there you go. All right, the last rivet's out. The boss is off. What the remaining bits of the dipstick boss gasket are coming off. So now we're gonna, I'm just gonna get this all cleaned up, and we'll get ready to weld the weld nuts on. All right, so the oil pan is all cleaned up. We have the new dipstick boss, which actually has threads left in it. here's the new gasket, and these are the weld nuts. All right, so these are going to go inside the pan, and we're going to weld them in. And then, if I ever have another leak, I'll be able to remove this. All right, makes life a little bit easier. And these are all the little things on a, on an engine build or whatever you might be doing that you don't really think about, and it does come up, and this is the right way to do things. So I'm going to get this thing bolted together, and then we're going to weld it up. All right, so the dipstick boss is bolted in. We'll go around the other side. You can see, okay, these are the, there we go. These are the weld nuts, all right? So there's no gasket, there's no sealer, there's nothing on here. One thing I did do is there's a little bit of anti-seize on all the screws, because if you've ever, welded a weld nut or a nut, you will know that sometimes after the heat and everything goes into everything, they don't want to come out. So we're going to try to keep that to a minimum, and hopefully after everything cools down, these will come out nice and easy. Then we can put some sealer and the gasket on, and then we'll be done. Let's go. I'm going to go get the welder all set up, and we'll burn these things in. All right, so this is an extremely difficult thing to try to get a good video of while I'm welding. I'm going to do the best I can. I already tacked the bottom parts in, which are really hard to see. So we're just going to do a tack on the end of this nut, on the end of this nut. We're trying to keep the heat away from the center. And hopefully after everything cools down, we'll be able to take the screws out. All right, that should do it. We're gonna let that cool down, and we'll see what happens when we take the screws out. All right, so that's where we are. We got a nice tack on each weld nut. Nothing's gonna go anywhere. We're gonna let this sit for a few more minutes. I'm gonna take the screws out. And if they come out good, we're all set. I did put a little anti-seize on all the screws because everything helps with stuff like this. And then once they come out, we'll put a little bit of sealer, we'll put the gasket on, and we'll bolt this thing down, and hopefully no more leaks. All right, so the bolts came out nice. I got the gasket just glued to the pan right now. Put a little bit of sealer, don't overdo it. My sealer of choice lately is a little bit of Permatex Ultra Gray. I find that works pretty good. So we got a little bit of silicone on the other side. I got a little bit more silicone on the boss. Really don't need a whole lot, just enough. Just keep it sticky. All right, being that these bolts go into the pan, we're gonna put a little bit of thread sealer on the bolts. All right, because we're not gonna go do all this stuff and then have the bolts leak oil. So we're gonna get the first one started. All right, just snug it. And that's pretty much it. This is a very basic, very simple video. You know, not all this stuff is exciting. You know, some of this stuff is awesome and some of it's boring, but regardless of the fact, it all needs to get done. All right, you're not going to go and spend all this time, money, and effort building an engine, doing all this, painting everything, and then all of a sudden you're leaking oil out of here. So, you know, regardless of it's exciting, it's still important. So the Ultra Gray, what I like to do with this stuff is snug it up. Don't crank it down. Don't go crazy. Let that sit. I'm gonna let that sit for another hour or two. I'm gonna go find something else to do. Then I'm gonna come back and final tighten it. It's gonna be good to go. I don't use silicone on bolts. Some people do. I don't like to use silicone on bolts because once the silicone dries, if you turn the bolt, it kind of breaks the seal. So some thread sealant's good because in an hour or two, I can come back to this, torque these down a little bit, and they're still gonna stay sealed. It's not gonna break. Same thing goes with the dipstick tube. Once I put the dipstick tube in, regardless, once the dipstick tube's in, it's not really coming back out. So I'll probably silicone that, but the bolts over here, I'm gonna stick with the thread sealer. So I, hope this wasn't too boring of a video. They're not all gonna be, entertaining and awesome, but regardless, it's still stuff that has to get done. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this helped some people out, and we'll see what I got for the next one. Thanks.